Good afternoon. Welcome to the Vanderbilt Local Community Conversations, brought to you by the Office of Community Relations. My name is Alfred DeGraff Reed II, and I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for Local Government Relations and Community Partnerships in the Division of Government and Community Relations. I am honored to moderate this conversation today, which is entitled Sheroes, Celebrating Those Who Blaze the Trail and Their Legacy. I cannot think of a more fitting person to be honored than Betty Nixon. You all saw the flyer in the MyVU article, I imagine, but I do want to say a few words about her background before we get to our panelists. Betty was an inspiration to public servants. She was one of the first women to run for mayor of Nashville. Betty had a distinguished 12-year career on Nashville's Metro Council, including being the first woman chairperson of the Finance Committee. She was also the first woman to manage a statewide campaign in Tennessee. She was integral in the preservation of Belmont-Hillsborough and Hillsborough West End neighborhoods, and a historic marker soon will be dedicated in her honor. And if you happen to drive by the house, you can see it because it's already up. Betty worked in Vanderbilt Community and Government Relations from 1990 to 2007. She began as a special assistant addressing policy issues and working to build partnerships between Vanderbilt and K-12 schools and businesses to improve public education. She was the first to lead the Office of Community Neighborhoods and Government Relations during the reorganization of the Division of Public Affairs in 2000, now known as the Office of Community Relations in the Division of Government and Community Relations. I imagine that you will hear a lot of common themes throughout this discussion today. Trailblazer, civic and community leader, pioneer, women's rights activist, friend, mentor, and neighbor. Our panelists will elaborate more, but I'd like to take a point of personal privilege to tell you about the first time I met Betty. I was on my first campaign in Nashville, and I happened to go to a Christmas party. I did not know what to expect. I definitely didn't expect to see half of the city inside of her home. But as I walked in, Betty was so interested in knowing who I was, she made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. That's just the type of person Betty was. I had the privilege of working with her a little later on another campaign where she hosted a Christmas in July event for Mayor Dean. And she introduced me to something that I will never forget. It was chocolate chip cookies with bacon. Now, I love chocolate, I love cookies, and I love bacon, but I never had all three of them together until Betty made some cookies for us and we enjoyed and we planned that great event. And before I move on, I want to just also say the conference room in our office at 2007 Terrace Place is the Betty C. Nixon Center for Community Connections. And most of the community meetings that we have on campus are located right there at the lone conference room table. Now, I have three quotes that I want to share. The first one comes from Mayor Carl Dean. Betty was a force for good in Nashville, highly ethical and extremely smart. She paved the way for many women to succeed in Nashville politics. I will always remember her sense of humor and her grace. The next quote comes from David Mills. Betty was a ferocious advocate. Her ownership of Nashville was complete. She was a brilliant thinker, strategist, and doer. Her vision was not limited to women, it encompassed everyone. And the last quote comes from Marilyn Robinson. Betty liked to get into good trouble. She did what she thought was right without regard to pushback. I admired Betty because she followed her own compass. So those were, I'm sure we could have a lot more quotes from everyone on here, a lot of family and friends on here this afternoon. But at this time, I'd like to introduce our panel. First, we have Davidson County Clerk, Brenda Wynn. Brenda is a Nashville native and a graduate of Pearl High School. She's a double Tiger, receiving both her bachelor's and master's degree in business administration from Tennessee State University. Brenda was appointed Davidson County Clerk by the Metro Council in August of 2012, and she was elected County Clerk by the voters of Nashville and Davidson County in November of 2012. becoming the first African-American female to win an election to a constitutional office in the county. Brenda's no stranger to community engagement. Before her election, she served as the director of community outreach for Congressman Jim Cooper. And prior to that, she was the first director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods for then Mayor Bill Purcell. Before joining the mayor's office, Brenda spent 9 years at Meharry Medical College, where she served numerous roles. Next, we have Laura Smith. Laura currently oversees legal matters, government relations, strategic planning, and community involvement for NES. She has not only displayed exceptional leadership within NES, but has also proven herself to be a leader throughout the Middle Tennessee community. In 2019, Laura served as the president of the Nashville Bar Association, the largest metropolitan bar association in Tennessee with nearly 3,000 members. Welcome, Laura. And last and certainly not least, I'd like to welcome and introduce Sandra Sepulveda. Sandra is the first Latina elected to the Metro Council of Nashville and Davidson County, representing District 30. She is a child of immigrants and has lived in Southeast Nashville since she was a child. She is a product of Metro Public Schools. She attended Haywood Elementary, McMurray Middle, and Overton High School before enrolling at Trevecca Nazarene University, where she worked 2 jobs to pay tuition. She graduated with a degree in history and political science. Sandra previously worked as operations director for the Tennessee Democratic Party. So I'd like to welcome each of you here this afternoon, and I, along with everyone on this virtual platform, are looking forward to the discussion. So I'm going to kick off the first question to you, Brenda, and Laura. I'll ask the same question. You both knew Betty personally. What type of influence did she have on you?
Well, and you addressed me first, so I'll get started here first. I'd just like to say hello to everybody who's joined us here on the call. Everybody who's come out today to salute and pay tribute to a wonderful, wonderful woman, Betty Nixon. So let me answer your question. I knew about Betty and admired her long before I got to know her personally. When I was a volunteer with the League of Women Voters when Betty first ran for mayor of Nashville. Now, I didn't know of any woman who'd ever run for mayor in Nashville, at least not while I was able to vote. But Betty did it in 1987, and she turned around and did it again in 1991. She didn't listen to naysayers telling her what she couldn't do. Betty just did it. She ran and she helped to pave the way for our city, for Nashville, to elect its first woman mayor in 2015. Now, I got to know Betty even better in 2007 when Betty and Marilyn Robinson recruited me to serve as co-chair of the 2007 NAACP Freedom Fund banquet. Betty, Marilyn, and I, and whoever else would join us at night, we spent countless hours in the NAACP office working on behalf of that organization. And if you spend any time with Betty, I mean, you got to see her courage, her confidence, and that can-do spirit that would rub off on you. It was contagious. And so for me, what that meant, that can-do spirit meant that before I knew what was happening, Betty had recruited me to serve as her 2008 Freedom Fund banquet co-chair. Betty Nixon was a revolutionary. She was a connector. Someone said that Betty was a community organizer before communities knew they needed to be organized. Her vision, her foresight, allowed her to tackle issues like diversity, equity, and inclusion before they were even popular. And let me share an example. I remember Betty inviting me and my Black girlfriends to dinner at her home with her white girlfriends. I do remember that she and Henry made some of the best country ham in the city. And it was over those dinners that Betty built bridges in Nashville, not the brick and mortar type bridges, but the kind of bridges that broke down barriers as we women who were there and sharing dinner together were able to get to know each other better. That's how she impacted me.
Thank you, Brenda. Laura?
So I joined Nashville Electric Service in 1993, and at the time that I joined NES, I'm a young lawyer. I just passed the Tennessee bar exam, and I come to this organization, and it's an industry and an organization that is, women were in the minority for sure, and so we have Betty Nixon, this icon in the Nashville community, on our board, and just by the nature of what I do, what I did, I had the privilege of interacting with our board members, and I learned so much from back in those early days from Betty Nixon, about how to lead. I learned some really dirty details, some really great tips on how to navigate a complex political environment. She was masterful, absolutely masterful at that. And then in the years after that, I was involved in an organization, what's now the Nashville Women's Political Collaborative. And Betty was also very involved in that organization. And that group tackled some really tough women's issues. And I think sometimes Betty was this, petite little thing. And I think of her sometimes as the fearless girl statue, where she is just bold and brave against the world. And so that was really how my relationship with Betty started, through political activism and also through NES and her excellent leadership of that organization. Then years later, Marilyn Robinson joined us, so I had a chance to work with another icon. But gosh, Betty was such a trailblazer, and not having had a lot of professional women mentors, I took to Betty as a young professional, and she was so gracious to take me under her wing and to teach me, to develop me and promote me.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you both so much for sharing that. So Sandra, how about tell us about your awareness of Betty Nixon? I don't know if you all had the opportunity to meet, but we'd love to hear your thoughts about Betty.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually never got the chance to meet Betty. I was very aware of her working at the Tennessee Democratic Party. You know, there are a lot of people that passed throughout my 6 years at the party. And Betty was one of the people that was most talked about after that happened. I was trying to remember, and I do remember the chair at the time, Mary Mancini, coming up and saying, Betty Nixon passed, and then the entire staff just going into stories about about Betty and the work that she had done at the party at the time. I was just an office manager, and so I was tasked with ordering flowers for anyone who had passed throughout that time, and so I was tasked with that, and I just remember the staff going into all of these varying stories, and me being very saddened that I wasn't able to actually meet her at that time. It hadn't been long since I had just started getting into politics.
Certainly. Well, thank you for that. Well, I will say that Betty was special. She was certainly a jewel, and I will go on the record and say that Nashville would not be Nashville if Betty weren't a part of it. So thank you for the comments. So let's move back on. So the next question will be, we've all heard about mentorship and why it's important, but particularly for women. So how have you paid that forward? And is mentoring women important in a vital part of your role in the utility work? Laura, Brenda working as a constitutional officer here in Nashville, and Sandra, you too, being on the Metro Council. So anyone can start off.
I'll jump in and say that while Betty was certainly my mentor and friend, we never went through the process of embarking on like a formal mentoring relationship. We developed a friendship first, and Betty, in her very natural way, just sort of stepped into that role. it's really beautiful. We've touched on a little bit about what a welcoming person she was and how she put people at ease. Brenda remarked on Betty was a connector. Understanding that certain people with common interests needed to meet each other, get to know each other, and make those connections. And so I learned all of those things through my friendship with her. And then you see this masterful way that she develops others, that she advocates for issues that matter, that in connecting other people. And you just, for me, I saw the right way to do things and I wanted to emulate that. And so while in my organization and in my life, I might have some formal mentoring relationships, what I really try to do in the Betty Nixon vein is look for opportunities to serve other people, to develop other people, to connect people, and candidly to be a part of things that make a difference. She was just the best.
And let me just add into what Laura said. I mean, for me, mentoring in the workplace is important for women because if you can see it, you can be it. I saw Betty Nixon be so many things to so many people in this community. I mean, I think Laura once, when we talked another time, said she was fearless. There was no issue in this community that she wouldn't tackle if somebody asked her to. That was who Betty was. And as women, we've got to remember, we have to lift as we climb. We can't leave other women behind. We have to bring them along with us. And I just want to say that I've got 2 young women that I have had the great fortune to work with and to mentor. And it's just been so inspiring to see them grow professionally and to become mentors themselves. So, I just think it's important that we bring other women along. And as a first woman elected Davidson County clerk, when I look at the transformation that's happening in my office here, and I see the number of women that we're bringing into our management team, I'm excited about the potential pipeline that we're creating for women leaders.
Thank you.
So I'm a little on the younger side, so I haven't really had many mentees, you know. I have worked with a lot of young women who are around my age, and I consider them more peers than anything. But now as I'm starting to get older, I have found that a lot more young women, and specifically young Hispanic women, have started reaching out, wanting to learn more about politics. And I'm very open to having coffee with them and sitting down and talking to them about just how some of the systems work and some of the barriers that they might face, and not just in politics, but it's very unique being a woman in a room full of men, and then another thing being a young brown woman in a room where people are older and there's more men and all of that. So I try and walk some of my peers through that as much as I can.
Thank you for that. And before we move to the next question, I did see a chat in there. I know David Mills is participating, and I know he was one of Betty's mentees, along with other people. I consider myself to be a mentee of Betty's as well. And also Brenda, she mentioned the pipeline is important, but Brenda, I will say when she became clerk, she opened up a slot in Congressman Cooper's office, and I was selected to follow in her footsteps. So I just remember how Brenda would meet me and say, look, let's take as much time as you need for you to understand how the federal government works. So, I mean, just wanted to point out, just like David Mills' comment went earlier, that she just wasn't about mentoring women. Betty it was all encompassing, but I wanted to bring it up because it's very important to acknowledge the fact that women have to support other women and be mentors and role models. Laura, were you about to say something?
I do want to chime in on that, because one of the things that Betty did that I think is so beautiful that all of us could learn from is She helped people with no expectation that it was going to benefit her personally or even a cause that she cared about. So sometimes Betty would interact with someone and something about that person inspired her to make that connection, to help advance them, to encourage them, to enlighten them, to connect them. And it was absolutely selfless. And it's a beautiful thing about her that I'd love to emulate that more and more.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So Sandra, let's go back to you. So for the first time in Metro's history, the Metro Council is comprised of half females. So tell me about that and how has that been for you? And I also, you're the first Latina elected as well. So maybe you can take both of those together and give us a nice explanation of how you're enjoying being on the Metro Council.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to give a shout out to Council Member Allen, who is actually the chair of the Women's Caucus. And I think Councilwoman Allen represented the district that Ms. Nixon used to. And I think Councilmember Cash, who's also on, currently represents it. So yes, we are half women, and for the first time in history, we are a very historic council body right now. And you know, I've only been in the role for over a year now, and I can't imagine what it was like before, not having this huge group of women who are just trailblazers and who are so passionate about the work that they are doing. You know, as a caucus, the meetings that we have had, there are several issues that are brought up, and you need women in the room because there's certain perspectives that only can be thought of through lived experience. And I think that that's what having a group of 20 women mean for the council. We are better off as a city with this huge number of council members that have joined. Being the first Latina and the only Latina brings its challenges as well, you know. It's something that I think that, you know, Council Member Zulfat Suara would understand, her being the first Muslim and the only Muslim council member. You take on this huge weight and responsibility of being a representative for a whole community of people. And when you're the only one, you also become the example for a community of people. And that takes a toll on you. It definitely can. There are very much quite a few sleepless nights. My goal is not to be the only one. You know, it's all fun. You know, being invited to many things and getting to speak to many groups of people. But I need help. It's a lot for a single person to take on. But I am thankful for many other council members who have stepped up and who have offered advice. And I'm not in a room alone, even though it feels like it sometimes.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate that. I certainly don't want to get in trouble with Councilmember Cash, but when I saw the numbers on election night, I said, you know what? Now the Metro Council is going to pass the most significant piece of legislation ever because half of the body is composed of females. So I'm just so happy to see where Nashville is on that front. Brenda or Laura, do you want to add anything about that? Anything you've noticed about the Metro Council? No, it's okay.
They're moving right along, working toward improving all things in this city. But I'm excited about the fact that, you know, so many women are following in the footsteps of women like Betty Nixon into that council chamber and into the city council to serve and protect the citizens of this city.
I'll add also back in the 90s through the Women's Political Caucus, there were only, I think at one point there were 3 and then 6 women in the council. And Betty was a part of a planning session and one of the presenters at a planning session that was termed 6 out of 40 is not enough. And so really a wonderful, we got wonderful wisdom from Betty, both advocacy and wisdom, encouraging qualified people to run and for the council to be more representative of the community as a whole.
Great. So I think it's fair to say that we can all see Betty smiling down on the Metro Council right now.
Yes, for sure.
Absolutely. So the next question is this. So growing up, who were your female heroines? Like who were the heroes that you looked up to? Who helped shape you to be the person that you are today? And it could be Betty, it could be other people, but I'm very interested in hearing that from this panel.
Well, let me say that I'm sure that Annie and Mignon will relate to what I have to say about who about the woman who was most instrumental in my life, and it was my mom. I mean, my mom was always the woman I most looked up to. She was a single parent. She found herself having to raise 5 kids. We lived in public housing. Money was always tight. There was a time when rent was, and I'm really gonna date myself, rent was $41 a month, and she made $42 a week. So one of those weeks, we were really struggling with that lone dollar. But the one thing that my mom constantly did was to encourage me. She told me there was nothing in this world that I couldn't do. And even though she struggled financially, she constantly encouraged all of her 5 kids to go to school, to do our best. And she said to get a good education. For her, that good education was the high school diploma, which she didn't get. She got a GED late in life, and I'm so proud of her doing that even. But she said she wanted us to go on and get college education. So all 5 of us we graduated high school. When Alfred, you said I graduated in 1974 from Pearl High School, but all of us went on to college. And 4 of my mom's 5 kids graduated college. My mama, for me, was always my biggest cheerleader. She constantly encouraged, she constantly supported, and again, always telling me that I could, not that I couldn't. She was and will always be my shero.
Thank you. I love that tribute. That was beautiful, Brenda.
I'm pleased to say that my mother is watching this right now. Like, I know you lost your mom a few years ago. Brenda, I feel so fortunate that I still have mine. And she was sitting in a chair in my office, but she's in one of my colleagues' offices down the hall right now. Shout out to Momsy. My mother, she certainly did a lot to shape me. I was blessed that she was a stay-at-home mom. My mother has a servant's heart. And so that was something that she instilled in me as a young person, was to give back to the community. She is the most caring, kind soul that anyone could meet. And whatever kindness and sweetness I have in me, I surely got from her. My dad was very different. The 2 of them were just, I am the person I am because of them. He held me to a high standard, even though I think he was a little bit chauvinistic. I think I fell into an exception, and there was nothing by God that I couldn't and shouldn't do because I was his daughter. But the crazy thing about your question, Alfred, is I didn't really know a lot of professional women. I went to law school not knowing a single female lawyer until I got to law school. And so it was interesting embarking on this career where I didn't have any real female professional role models. And that's part of the reason why, reflecting back, I could tell you that Betty was so pivotal in my professional development, because when I come to NES, we have a 5-member board. We are a $1.5 billion a year organization now. And of our 5 board members having this incredible leader who was not just wicked smart and well in tune with the inner workings of the Nashville business community and the government environment, but who was also really committed to the community. So there certainly have been a great number of others, but early in my career, I would say Betty was so pivotal. And yeah, so it's a big honor for me to be here.
Thank you, Laura. Sandra?
Yeah, continuing with the theme of moms. My mom is the person I aspire to be. She came to this country alone when she was 13, 14 from Mexico. And she has been a hard worker. My parents picked flowers for 25 cents a dozen. My mom has worked several factory jobs, dog bone factories. She works at a factory right now. She has cleaned hotels. She has cleaned offices. She has worked at retirement homes, cooking. You name it, she's done it. And it's not uncommon for her to only have one day off. This past week, she worked 11 days straight. My mom works hard to provide what she can for us. My parents only made it through elementary school. I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. And that's thanks a lot to her. She didn't have much, but she gave us what she could. And I just want to make sure I build on her sacrifice for us.
Yes, that was
Okay, now you're making us cheer up here.
I know, I was gonna say the same thing. Shout out to the moms. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a great way, and also great way just to honor them. Let's switch gears for a moment and just talk about first jobs and how roles have changed in your careers. Sandra, you may not, it may be like the first question, you're like, well, I'm still at the beginning of my career, I can't give you that much, but Laura and Brenda, I'd love to hear about the roles and how the workforce has changed since you've been working.
I'd love to talk about this. So when I started practicing law in Nashville in 1993, it was a different environment. I remember my first legal conference in the industry. You have lawyers from all around the region who are coming together for continuing legal education, and there were about 200 lawyers in the room. There were 3 women. And so I just felt I was a fish out of water. Going into the courthouse on Friday for a motion day, very often I was the only female lawyer. It's so vastly different now, and I love it. We have so many great women judges in the community. We have some really rock star women lawyers. And in my organization, I'm so proud of the diversity within our organization, within our leadership. So half of the leadership of Nashville Electric Service are women, half. Our CEO is an African-American man. We have a leadership, I know he's Brenda's brother-in-law, and he's awesome.
Betty helped make that happen.
Betty helped make it happen. She mentored DJ also. He would, I know.
Yes.
We were laughing about this session today because so many of the stories that we shared about Betty Nixon, we couldn't share in this environment, but she was such a treasure to all of us. And really it's an example of her legacy shaping the face of this organization today. But But it's a different environment in 2021, and I'm so delighted that that my industry is more reflective of the community, and my organization is more reflective. Boy, it's been 28 years. It's been a road.
Well, thank you for that, Laura. I do want to say I see one of my favorite chancellors on the call as well, and Martin. So I want to just say hi to you. So Brenda, what about you? Tell us about your background and how the roles have changed in the work environments that you've worked in.
Well, let me just say that I believe it's divine providence that I find myself, that I began my career with the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County about a month out of high school as a senior typist clerk. I worked at the Model Cities program and spent 5 years working for Metro at the time. Married, left town, came back to Nashville, tried to reconnect with Metro, but couldn't. But then here I find myself now, almost 50 years later, at the end of my career, and I will wrap it up here in this organization that gave me my start. I'm along the way, I worked in the not-for-profit community. I worked in administration at Meharry, worked for Bill Purcell and Jim Cooper. But the one thing that I can say is that throughout my career, my role, though my roles may have changed, the one thing that's been constant is that that I can't forget that service and serving others has and should always be at the core of what I do professionally. I think that's a trait that I believe comes from observing people like Betty Nixon, watching her unapologetically do what she thought was right in this community and never telling anybody that she was sorry. Again, I think back to her time at NES and the work that she did there to advance women and people of color in that organization. Again, just knowing that Betty for us models serving others and service to community.
Thank you.
And Alfred, I just want to say, I think it's important to say that I'm in the position I'm in, and I'm lucky to be in the position I'm in, where, first term on council and it's half women. And that's only because there are these great group of women that came before me, like Betty Nixon, and people who have worked in this before me, like Brenda, like Laura being in the room. Newcomers like me don't have to experience some of those hardships that you all did, because you all paved the way. And I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Sandra. So Laura, I'm gonna single you out for a moment, not in a bad way. Of course, you talked about law and being one of the few females in the room. So you work in the utility industry. So how has that been as a female?
So I think the utility industry is changing. It still continues to be a very male-dominated industry, and so one of my colleagues, Antonio Carroll, is on this as well. And we sort of joke when we go to these conferences that all the diversity in the room is coming from Nashville and Memphis. And but I do think there have been some strides within the Tennessee Valley Authority. There are some really strong women in leadership, people of color in leadership. That's really great to see. I think there's some that sends a message, and I think Brenda touched on it before. Is something like, if you see it, you can be it. And so I think it is really extremely important for young professionals who are entering the workforce to see women in leadership, to see people of color in leadership. Because without that, it's very hard for them to see themselves move into those roles. So we got a long way to go in the industry, but we've made a lot of progress.
Thank you, Laura. So I want to also just mention to everyone who's here, if you have any questions that you want us to ask, please put it in the chat box. I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. So each of you are in varied stages of your career. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, this is going to be hard for me. Um, a few years ago, I was asked a similar question, and it was it was shortly after my younger sister died. Um, my first thought was, what inspires me and what lifts me the most? And my answer was a simple four-letter word. It was love. My love for my family, my love for my friends, my love for this city. And I look at Betty Nixon and just recall that she was a beloved member of the Nashville community. She was a woman ahead of her time. Um, uh, Betty could take conflict and turn it into conversation. She taught us in this community about public service and political strategy, and she was a neighborhood pioneer. I've got an old Nashville scene in my office, and it dates back to 2000. But there's a picture of Betty from the 1970s where she and the folks over in the Hillsborough, Belmont area were organizing. Betty was deeply loved by so many of us, and I know that so many of us on this call understand what I'm saying. And I hope that my legacy can be likened unto Betty, one who gave love and was loved.
Thank you, Brenda. That was beautiful.
I think legacy is that's a hard one for me. I noticed for Brenda too. And I think for me, what I hope to do is plug in and involve myself with organizations and with people who are making a difference. And we all have different skill sets, and we all have different talents and abilities. And so I just want to use the tools that I have, the skills that I have, to make a difference in the community with things that matter. And so to some extent, I appreciate that at this organization, I have an opportunity to shape the direction of the organization. And that impacts all of us. When everyone, probably most of the people on this call, are customers of Nashville Electric Service. Mm-hmm. And I want to do my part to make sure that we are a better organization that at our core we serve our customers. And so similarly with other organizations, whether it's the Nashville Bar Association, I worked to enhance the collegiality within the bar and the service of the bar back to the broader community. Other organizations as well. So I just want to use the tools I have to make a difference.
Thank you, Laura. Sandra.
So I've actually been asked this question quite a bit. The district I represent, I've lived here since I was 5. I still live in the same house. Almost 30% of my district lives at or below the poverty line. These are my people. These are my neighbors. I know this place like the back of my hand. And I've always said that if I could change people's everyday life, then that's enough for me. It makes a world of difference. One sidewalk can make a world of difference for some people. And I don't know if people understand how important that is for some, or if kids could have books, textbooks, physical textbooks. I didn't have textbooks when I was in school. I had to share those. And I had photocopies. Small everyday things. If I could change even one of those and change someone's everyday life, then I think that's the epitome of a fulfilled life for me.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you,
Sandra. There's that starfish story with the little boy walking down the beach, and there are all these starfish, and he's pitching the starfish back into the water because they're roasting on the beach. And a man comes up and says, what are you doing? And he says, well, I'm saving these starfish. And the man says, well, you can't possibly save all of them. And he looks at the one in his hand and he says, but I can save this one. And so that's what you're doing in your district for each of the people, for your sidewalks and for your public works projects and for the work that you're doing to make the schools a better place. You are saving starfish.
Thank you.
Sure.
I've never heard that story before. I love it. That's great.
Great story.
Alfred, can I just want to lighten the moment a little bit. You know, I'm sure that there are tons of people on this call who have their own special Betty Nixon stories. Laura and I shared one when we talked, I think with you, and it was the fact that Betty led a protest where when she was younger.
Yeah, so back
Laura, did you?
Yeah, in the civil rights movement, Betty's father owned a restaurant in the Nashville community and it was segregated. And Betty led a protest at her dad's restaurant to advocate for desegregation. And it's Betty was.
Again. She was a revolutionary, a woman ahead of her time, you know, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion when it wasn't popular. That was Betty Nixon.
Yeah, that is a beautiful story. I appreciate you all for sharing that because I hadn't heard that one until we talked the other day. I do mention that, you know, our office has been talking about, you know, how can we properly honor Betty? We've been talking about this for quite some time. We just didn't make this up a month ago and say we wanted to do it. So we really, COVID complicated a lot of it. So we originally intended to do something in conjunction with the historical marker. We were going to do something at that point. But this is just the first conversation that we're having because we intend to offer a Betty Nixon Award to someone, a civic leader, annually start next year. So before we did that, we wanted to have this conversation first. So we're looking forward to it. And we see everybody, we see a lot of people who are on the call right now, and we may ask for some advice on nominations and things like that, but that's something that we're committed to doing and we look forward to doing it. So you actually took my question, Brenda, about the Betty Nixon story, if you could share one. But I do want to say this. I want to just first thank a lot of people for joining us today. It's very telling that we have a lot of people from Vanderbilt University, former colleagues. I know I see Gail Carr-Williams on here, who worked in the Office of Government Community Relations. I see Mary Pat Teague. I see the entire team from Dyer Observatory. I see OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute. We have people on from the Office of Federal Relations. That, you know, that doesn't happen every single day when we have community conversations. We have council members, we have judges on here, we have HWIN, Hillsborough West End Neighborhood Association. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing with the community. You know, this has just been such a remarkable, I see Miss Brenda from Edge Hill community. I see Joyce Searcy, you know, she made a comment earlier that said, you know, when she took the job at Belmont, the first person she sought out was Betty Nixon. So she talked to her. You know, I saw a beautiful quote in the newspaper that said, if you wanted to do anything in Nashville, your first stop was to Betty Nixon's office or to her house. You know, I didn't realize until Ann posted this a moment ago, but those homemade rolls were made by Betty. So not only did she host a big party for hundreds of people, she did all the prep work. It wasn't catered. So I mean that type of worker that Betty was. So I just want to go around for a round robin real quick and just ask for any closing remarks from the panelists. I didn't see any questions come in into the chat, but if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to share, we certainly welcome them.
I want to jump in and say I'm so glad that Betty's daughters are on this broadcast today. I don't want to cry. I told Brenda I was going to really try hard not to, But Betty's legacy carries on through the two of them. And she was incredibly proud of the work that they do and who they are as people. And it's just really wonderful that they're with us today.
Absolutely.
Let me say to Annie, Mignon, and David, it was so wonderful to see you join the call, and I'm just honored to be included in this conversation about Betty Nixon. She meant so much to so many of us, and her memory lives on. I got a special opportunity. Annie and Mignon know what it is, and it's a Grey Volvo. And so I just thank you for the fact that I have a memorabilia of Betty, something that I hold close to my heart, something that's special to me that was hers. So thanks.
And I'll just say thank you, everyone, for sharing these stories about Betty with newcomers like me. I hope that more people who are newer to politics and people who come after could continue to learn about Miss Nixon in different ways. And so I hope that that's something that could continue for the women that come after.
Thank you. I do want to mention that Andrea Blackman mentioned that the complete oral history of Betty Sharon, that story of segregated lunch counters, is available to the public as a part of the Civil Rights Oral History Project Library, which that's beautiful. So thank you for sharing that, Andrea, and congratulations on the new appointment in Metro government. I was so happy to see that announcement the other day. And also I saw in the chat that Councilmember at Large Berkeley Allen mentioned that there's a great picture of Betty addressing the Metro Council from her desk in the program at her memorial service. It now lives in the drawer of the District 18 Council desk to inspire
Oh, wow.
whatever council member follows her. And Tom Cash said that was the most inspiring gift that he's received as a council person, and he'll be glad when they get back to the courthouse so he can get some more inspiration. Kind of sounds like that Martin Luther King Jr. quote where he said he came to Nashville to gain inspiration. So I'm happy that that's inside of the desk. So I just want to, again, thank you all for joining us this afternoon for a quick conversation, a very well thought out conversation about someone who meant so much to us. You know, we are so excited to be able to go into when we can go back into the office, to be able to get into the conference room, because it's a beautiful picture of Betty standing in the hallway of the House, and she's looking down at the camera. And it's one of those pictures where you know that she's making sure that she's holding us accountable so that we can do the right thing for our neighbors and the community. Mm-hmm. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. This conversation will be available on YouTube, and it'll live in perpetuity, hopefully on our website. But this has been a great inspiration to me, and I'm so thrilled that each of you could join us. And again, I want to thank the panelists for being here and providing excellent dialogue. And I also want to thank the Office of Community Relations team, our events team, who puts these conversations together. Your work is not unnoticed. And last and certainly not least, thank you to VU Communications and their team for hosting us on this virtual platform and for helping us with our articles. And I would be remiss if I did not invite each of you to go to the Office of Government and Community Relations website and sign up for our monthly newsletter, because we share a lot of exciting events that we do in the community on that website, and we always spotlight someone. So thank you, and we hope to see you again soon when it's safe to do so.